This has got to be downright one of the most scariest Thanksgiving stories out there, so let's just get straight to the animation. I lived alone in an apartment with my pet Doberman Toby. I had moved away from my parents' place ever since I got a full-time job as an IT tech. Thanksgiving was just around the corner, and I had planned to stay by my parents' place for a few days after months of being away. However, although I was looking forward to it, one thing made me anxious: my mother. Being the eldest son who was still single, the task of caring for the woman who raised me was entrusted to me since she was now suffering from dementia. One moment she'd be on cloud 9, and then all of a sudden she'd be acting out of pocket like the girl possessed from the Exorcist movie. And if that wasn't creepy enough, I even saw her in the living room once talking to herself, laughing and crying simultaneously as she stabbed one of our family portraits displayed on the table with a kitchen knife.
He's not part of the family! He's not part of the family! He's not part of the family!
I had no idea what she was talking about, but after seeing a lot of videos online, everything was leading back to dementia. I didn't know how to respond to the situation, afraid she'd be ridiculed if friends or relatives dropped by the house. However, I vividly remember one of the videos talking about the ability of animals being able to alleviate the suffering of people diagnosed with chronic ailments. So that's when I stopped by the house with Toby one day and was greeted by my mother at the front door. She stared at me for quite a while, making me uneasy. So to withdraw from this awkward situation, I gently pulled my dog by the leash, thinking I should bring him inside the house. However, to my surprise, my mother gripped my other hand ever so tightly, saying,
"Get rid of that rodent! You understand me? I don't feel good around that dog!"
I replied, "Mom, it's just Toby. He used to live in this house before, remember? I took him away when I moved out. Can you at least try to remember that?" However, she frowned upon me, mistaking it for disrespect.
How dare you! You're in no position to defy me.
Mom, if I'm coming over for Thanksgiving, then so is
To
Toby.
hell with that dog! You only want him for yourself. You can't fool me.
People around me would always talk about patience, reminding me that her behavior was simply the result of her ongoing condition. But there's a limit to everything. Once the cup is full, everything would fall into disarray. Frustrated, I shouted, "No, he's not going anywhere! You're the reason why I wanted to move out!" Frightened, Toby ceased to wag his tail, slowly hiding behind my legs, and at that moment, I saw my mother's eyes brimming with hate. Then, seconds later, her mood changed again as she smiled and said,
All right, we'll have it your way. Come in, little boy. Who's a good boy? Yes, you are.
She caressed Toby's head and brought him inside as I stood there delirious, and nothing out of the ordinary transpired in the days that followed. However, just when I thought she had gotten closer to Toby, I heard her hollering in the dining room one night. I got up to check on her and saw that she was distraught by all the broken plates scattered on the floor. Then, as soon as she saw me, she yanked me by the collar and said,
Donate this dog. Give him away or leave him in the forest. I don't care. Just get rid of him.
I didn't know what to make of it, since Toby was well behaved the entire time. For all I know, my mother could have been the one responsible for all the broken plates, coercing me to cave in. I ended up getting a broom and sweeping the sharp pieces of glass away, while I saw my mother scamper to her room, leaving me to clean up the mess. I figured I'd bring Toby around the next time we had dinner, in hopes that if she saw my father around Toby, then maybe she'd eventually warm up to him. One night, I went into the kitchen to get myself a glass of water and could hear my mother's voice in the living room talking to our dog. I didn't want to frighten her, and so I gradually walked toward the room and took a peek.
It'll all be over soon, you rodent. You don't belong here. My son's right. It's no use giving you away. That wouldn't suffice. What we need is a permanent solution. It's time to give thanks.
Toby barked in a tone that would imply he was threatened, and for the past couple of weeks, the only time he was ever anxious was whenever my mother was around. So, as most people would do, it would have been reasonable to have kept the dog next to me at all times. However, seeing that she never inflicted physical harm on the dog, I felt that there was no need to intervene, and that ignoring her would be the best course of action. She was indeed known for her bad temper. However, I never saw her as someone who could take the life of a living creature. pressure. The night before Thanksgiving, my father finally arrived home from his long business trip, and when I suggested buying dinner for us, he immediately gave me the thumbs up. However, it was different for my mother though. Enraged, she kept raving about how she was the woman of the house and that she was the only one responsible for preparing the meals at home. My father and I looked at each other, puzzled and anxious. Finally, to avoid making matters any more awkward, we let her have her way due to her condition and persistence. The following day, I arrived home from a quick stroll at the grocery store to pick up some sides for the Thanksgiving dinner with my parents. I remember seeing my mother placing a massive platter with a silver lid on the table. Crawling its way from the kitchen, the aroma was enticing and irresistible. My father and I couldn't wait to dig in. However, as soon as my mother lifted the silver lid, our jaws dropped, and my father stood in horror at the sight of something that was definitely not a turkey. She glanced at my father and me, saying,
I thought of being more creative this year, so bon appetit!
And just like that, Toby went from an adorable pet to a nauseating dinner that would leave me traumatized forever. Ah! Buckle up. The next Thanksgiving story may leave most of you creeped out before ever feasting at someone's dining table next Thanksgiving. As a disclaimer, you might lose your appetite after this one, so we suggest you eat beforehand.
I've been studying engineering at university for a couple years now. Since starting my higher education, I became close friends with a guy named Eddie. We would always study together even if we didn't have the exact same classes. We had our fair share of cagey, socially anxious students, but none were worse than Charles. Last semester, Eddie and I had advanced robotics together, so naturally we sat next to each other towards the middle of the room. Charles always sat as far back as the professor would let us, since it was such a small roster. I never knew much about Charles, except that he was a creepy loner emo type with long greasy hair straight out of the mid-2000s. He always wore the same black jeans and oversized sweater every day, so he had a bit of a smell to him too. But the most different thing about Charles was the way he constantly fidgeted during class, muttering to himself about this and that. His favorite thing was apparently Thanksgiving, because he talked about it all the time while talking in this weird, cheesy Joker impression.
Is it Thanksgiving yet? I can't wait to have some juicy, delicious turkey in my mouth. So close, so close.
I always wondered how such a clearly unhinged weirdo got enrolled into even a semi-prestigious university. But his skills in robotics must have been stellar to make up for everything else about him. I never wanted to find out though. But of course, the day came when the professor gave us a group assignment and told us to get into teams of 3. Obviously, Eddie and I were 2, but it seemed like everyone else was taken in a matter of seconds, leaving us with no choice but to work with Charles. The assignment was Thanksgiving themed, and we were supposed to have it done by the time we got back from break. For that reason or another, there was an insidious smile on Charles' face that gave both me and Eddie a really bad feeling about working with him. We all exchanged numbers so we could brainstorm over text. But mainly Eddie and I were just ignoring everything he sent us while we figured out ways to do the whole thing without him. Still, we knew we had to appease him somehow, so we both agreed when he invited us over to his house for an off-day Thanksgiving dinner, where we could discuss more concrete plans for the project. Charles said his parents were out of town for the weekend, so it would just be the 3 of us. Eddie and I tried to coordinate so we would arrive at the same time. That way neither of us would be alone with Charles. I texted Eddie when I left my place and he said he was already on the way, so it seemed like it would work out. When I arrived, I didn't see Eddie's car in the driveway. I made my way to the front door and rang up his phone once more, but still no answer. Then, Charles opens the front door wearing an apron with the most unhinged smile I've ever seen.
Happy Thanksgiving! I'm so glad you could make it. Please, come in.
Is Eddie here?
I think he should be arriving soon. Just come inside.
Right off the bat, I could tell Charles was acting strange, even more so than usual. But I went inside despite the weird feeling. I sat down at the dining table while Charles went into the kitchen.
Have a seat. Eddie should be here any minute now.
Okay.
You'll see there's already some sides out on the table. Feel free to have some. I'll bring the turkey out in a sec, okay?
Alright, dude. I was already creeped out, but I figured Eddie was close by, so I decided to shoot him a text, urging him to disclose his ETA and arrive as soon as possible. Where you at, man? What's your ETA? I need you here. It's so awkward right now. A few minutes passed and still no sign of Eddie. Not even a response to my texts. I started getting antsy and decided to call him. Right away, heard his phone ringing from inside the house. It seemed like the rings were coming from the kitchen. Eddie had a very distinctive ringtone, so I knew it had to be his phone. Quietly, I got up and crept toward the kitchen. His phone was blasting at full volume right around the corner.
Hey!
I was just about to step in when Charles came careening around the corner.
No guests in the kitchen. Get back to your seat, Mr. Snoopy.
Okay.
Have a seat. The turkey is done, so if you want some, I'll need to see some manners.
Okay, Charles. The turkey smells delicious. Charles was blocking me from going into the kitchen, so I was forced to go back to my seat. As I did so, Charles put the huge platter down at the center of the table and took the seat directly across from me. I was literally starting to shake and hyperventilate. Eddie's phone was still going off and Charles was staring at me with the psychotic look in his eyes. Is that Eddie's phone ringing in the kitchen over there?
Of course not. It's my phone. I told you already. No guests allowed in the kitchen.
I held my phone out and showed him that I was dialing Eddie's phone. A couple rings later, and it timed out. In the exact second, the phone in the kitchen stopped ringing.
I know you're lying. Where's Eddie? Oh, come on. Don't you want some delicious turkey? No, shut up. Tell me where Eddie is. I really thought you were smart. I can't believe you haven't figured it out yet. Isn't it obvious? Eddie is right here.
Charles lifted the dome off the platter, and on it was a turkey with Eddie's head. It was severed and sewn on top of a turkey, and it was moving, wings, legs, and all. Even Eddie's face was smiling with ghastly wide open eyes.
Happy Thanksgiving. Ha 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 ha.
I ran away and abandoned my car. When I got to a safe distance, I called the cops, and they quickly came to arrest Charles. But to this day, I still don't get it. He wasn't trying to get away with it all. It seemed like all he wanted to do was show off his ability with robotics by reanimating my dead friend. Poor Eddie. Every night since then, his face is all I can see.
Happy Thanksgiving. Ha 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 ha.
The next story was loosely inspired by a case that happened in November 26th of 2016. It was a Thanksgiving catastrophe that shocked the nation. The image below is a mugshot of the accused. Stay tuned later on and we will show you what he really looks like. The details are pretty disturbing, so we created an animation based on the alleged occurrence.
I'm already in my 20s, just chilling every so often without a care in the world. While most of my friends and classmates would talk about their jobs as doctors, lawyers, managers, or teachers, I chose to simply lay back as I constantly waited for my parents to pay my bills. Thanks to the old geezers, I didn't have a problem being unemployed. As far as I was concerned, I had everything I could ever want and need. So, as a fat, lazy lard, I'd lock myself in my bedroom, playing my favorite online games, as I rammed potato chips in my mouth, flushing them down my throat with a can of beer. However, just when I thought everything was perfect, my parents suddenly barged into my room one day, cussing me into getting a job.
Get a job! We can't look after you forever, son! I mean, look at you! You're nothing but a massive blob!
Don't you have a dream, Louie? Isn't there anything you'd want more than just sitting around here all day?
Teary-eyed, my mom asked.
Your mother's right. There's gotta be something.
My dad said, eyes scanning the four corners of my room, apparently disgusted. However, I remained fixated on the TV without glancing at my parents and replied, "Nope, I'm happy with the way things are."
Why, you little shit! I ought to beat the funnel cakes out of you!
I knew my dad wanted to hit me, but my mom was always there to stop him. Since that day, it became a daily routine for my parents to knock on my door and into the room, just to give me one hell of a pep talk. And the worst part was that I had to endure it every day. However, as the weeks passed, I eventually got used to it. and my parents' incessant rants would come and go like public utility vehicles. So, as a result, I would live my days consuming anything I found in the fridge, ordering pizza and all sorts of junk food online, while playing games all day without contributing anything useful to the house. But it's not as awful as it sounds. My parents were still healthy and strong enough to accomplish tasks independently and earn vast amounts of money. So, if you really think about it, why should I step in and tire myself out unnecessarily? Isn't it the responsibility of parents to constantly watch over their son regardless of age? Everything was in its proper place, and as far as I was concerned, I was living the dream. My mother would sometimes display the bills for the internet, telephone, groceries, and online games on the table, hoping she could persuade me. However, I remained reluctant to change my lifestyle and didn't pay for a single thing. So when Thanksgiving Day finally arrived, I yelled at my mom to bring me my favorite dinner. It was a special kind of meatloaf I would always request for every Thanksgiving, and without it, my day would be incomplete. Mom! Thanksgiving dinner! Now! I hollered even louder when I felt she wasn't paying attention to me. Mom! The meatloaf! Come on! Step on it, will ya? Moments later, I could hear heavy steps climbing up the stairs, and when my dad swung the door wide open, he said, "That's it, Louie! We're no longer paying your bills!"
We're not your slaves, Louie. We're your parents.
It didn't really matter that my parents reprimanded me. However, when my dad said it was time for them to stop paying my bills, the first thing that came to my mind was the end of online gaming. I was devastated. It was something I could never let go of. And besides that, where would I get all that sumptuous food? Outrage, I replied. "You can't do this to me, you traitors!"
Oh, yes, we can.
My mom yelled.
And that's not all. We're kicking you out if you don't get a job in the next month. You got that, Louie?
Did I hear that right? Surely these two were only having a rough day, and neither could have meant what they said. Mom, Dad, don't you think you're being a little too dramatic right now? It's Thanksgiving, for crying out loud.
I don't think you understand what Thanksgiving means, son.
My dad replied, his gaze penetrated through my skin. Downtrodden, I stood up from my chair, sobbing, frustrated that there were two of them and just one of me. Apparently, there was no way I could win against the majority. Hence, with all my strength, I pushed them out of the room, locked the door, and hollered, "Leave me alone or I'm calling the cops!"
Louie, this is for your own good.
You're lucky you have 300 pounds on me!
As I heard my parents' footsteps slowly fading away, I crouched in a corner, repeatedly asking myself, what am I gonna do? Where am I gonna stay? None of my parents are gonna give me the special treatment I require. Crap! How am I gonna eat? And what'll happen to my computer and to all my games? This is not happening. It's only a bad dream. Pull yourself together, Louie. However, moments later, when my tears had run out, I decided to head downstairs. Then, taking a peek, I saw my parents talking in the dining room. I slipped into the kitchen while my parents assumed I was grabbing food for Thanksgiving. That's when I grabbed a knife that would put an end to his madness. Then, hiding it behind my back, I went into the dining area and immediately began swinging the blade back and forth, like I was a character living in a GTA universe. Suddenly, it was silent. There was no one to tell me what to do. And finally, I was free. And so, wearing my blood-stained clothes, I brought out my console, sat on the couch in the living room, and began playing games. A few minutes later, I put down my controller and started eating my mom's delicious meatloaf. Then, when I finished, I called the cops, waiting to disclose everything that transpired.
911, please state your emergency.
Hi, my name is Louie. I wanted to say Happy Thanksgiving. My mom just made me the best meatloaf and turkey a son could ever ask for.
Sir, may I please ask if this is an emergency or not?
I just wanted meatloaf.
Sir,
My parents wouldn't give it to me, so I had to finish them.
Sir, there should be a dispatcher close to your proximity within the next few minutes.
I made the odd decision to turn myself in, as sirens could be heard in the background.
Sir? Hello? Sir? Sir?
Here's the image of the quote-unquote Louis. His real name was Joel, and did the unthinkable on a Thanksgiving holiday. His parents got the short end of the stick, all because they told him that they would no longer pay his bills. I guess it's safe to say that there will be a different type of meatloaf when he does his time.